All right, we're live again. 8 reasons why your wife wants to leave you. Today's topic, we're going to dive into some of the things that you need to be on the lookout for. Okay. You might be experiencing some of these, you might be experiencing multiple, maybe all of them, but you need to understand these concepts and you need to be on your game in actually how to manage yourself and how to be with the feminine when we're going through some of these. Okay. Now, the first one is she acts on emotion. The feminine feels, then acts. What this means is that most of her natural actions are derived from her feelings in the moment. Okay. This is how the feminine is wired. You can't change that. It comes down to accepting it, right? And being clear on how that dynamic works versus men, where they act and then feel. So, as a man, if you want to control your feelings, you essentially do that through taking certain actions that will derive the feelings that you want to have. For the feminine, quite the opposite, right? So, whatever she's feeling in the moment, her actions will represent those feelings. And changing her emotions will change her feelings. So I'm sure you've noticed that your wife is in a good mood and she's doing things in accordance of her being in a good mood. And then all of a sudden, in a matter of seconds, she can switch. And you don't even know what happened. How is it that 10 minutes ago she was super happy, lovey dovey, and then now she's pissed at me and she's calling me names? Well, it's because her emotions have changed for whatever reason, which now are causing her to behave differently. Okay. Now, there are things you can do about that. First, you want to accept and understand like where her actions are derived from. Okay. And you want to start observing her from this context that I just shared with you. Because until you're able to truly realize what's going on and see it for yourself, you'll have a really difficult time altering her emotions, right? If you don't know what the problem is, then how can you solve it? So it's super critical that you get into this mindset and you start looking at not only your wife, but if you have a daughter or if you go out and you have female friends, look at how their actions are derived from their feeling and start to look at what their state of mind is, what the feelings that are going on for them and how they act after that. Okay. And you'll probably have a chuckle because when you become aware of this, it's going to start to have you be so in tune and so clear and curious too, right? It'll have you want to be more curious about what's actually going on in the feminine. And oh my God, I can see these dynamics happening. So it's a pretty cool phenomenon. Okay.
Yeah, and the fact that life gets easier, right? Like so often you end up because you don't understand the other side. In this case, being a masculine man, you mean if you don't understand the feminine, you try to bring it back to something that you understand. You try to bring, hey, you're trying to force a woman to be more like you so that you can understand it better. But when you actually go through all this training and you get the understanding and the experience of, okay, masculine and feminine are very different. And now I'm starting to really understand feminine. Now I'm not so afraid of feminine anymore. I can just let feminine be feminine because I've grown in my masculine role to be able to be masculine. So it's so, as I said, it makes life actually a lot easier rather than, as I said, these force changes to try and get to some level of comfort.
Yeah. I mean, when the threat is gone, you're not threatened by the feminine, you're not threatened by what's going to happen next, but you actually understand it. It just brings a huge level of peace of mind to be able to recognize that and have the confidence in yourself that you get this. Okay. Next up is she feels unsafe in the marriage. This is another reason why women will leave you, right? Or your wife will potentially leave you. And here I'm very specifically focusing on emotional safety and security. Okay, so when I say that she feels unsafe in the marriage, I primarily focusing on emotionally. Yeah, there could be financial safety issues and mental safety issues and whatnot, but by far the most important thing for a woman in marriage is emotional safety and security, or in a relationship. And the reason why she feels unsafe is because she cannot safely express her feelings. Now, why is this important? Well, because for a woman to figure out what her feelings mean, she actually needs to be able to express it. And if she doesn't have the environment created by you in the marriage to be able to express her feelings, then she's going to have it all stuffed down. Okay? And she's going to feel misunderstood, angry, frustrated. You're going to have more arguments, more blowups. She's going to push your buttons more. Is because she doesn't feel heard, understood, appreciated, valued. And it all starts with the foundation of being able to create the space for your wife to express herself. She cannot figure out her feelings. And stuffing all that down will cause major suffocation for her. And so you need to understand that this, well, not just understand, but accept that this is the most important thing for a woman in marriage: emotional safety and security. And that you have a role that you play as the husband to be able to fulfill that emotional need. Okay? Because it is part of your job. I've said in previous trainings, previous lives, it's not the other way around. Okay? She is not responsible for your emotional well being, but you are for hers. Okay? So, getting this mastered, understanding it, accepting it, and being able to learn how to fulfill her emotional needs and creating that safety and security so she can express her feelings is critical in order for her to figure out what those feelings are. Because when she figures out what those feelings are, what will happen is she'll be able to resolve them. And the more she resolves these negative feelings specifically, the more she can talk it out, the more you can be a bouncing board or a sounding board, the faster she can get to the bottom of it, and the faster it will go away from the marriage. The faster you're going to have these consequences that typically come with that also go away, like the arguments, like the pushing your buttons, and so forth.
Yeah, we've spoken about it a lot of times, right? Around his ability to provide that emotionally safe space for her is largely dependent not only on knowledge, but also largely dependent on where he's at as a man in his own emotions, right?
Yep.
Because for a lot of times, a lot of men express they just feel like doormats when she's dumping all of her emotions on him, and that's because he doesn't know how to be in that environment. He doesn't know how to be solid, consistent, and reliable without feeling like, yeah, as often men have shared, like being a doormat. Oh, she can just express all this stuff and think that I don't have feelings. Um, but yes, your ability to become emotionally self-sufficient will have a great impact on your ability to provide that safe space for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is a really great lead in to the next reason as to why your wife might want to leave you. Okay. And that's she feels controlled. Now, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've yet to see a marriage break down that didn't have some aspects of control as part of the reason, right?
Mhm.
I mean, do you remember anybody that, and I mean, we work with thousands of men. Do you remember anybody that came across that you didn't see some level of control, whether financial, emotional, mental, spiritual, right? Physical control?
No, and again, the key point in all of that for me is that the women have expressed feeling controlled. But it's not about the masculine looking at it and going, I'm
Yeah.
not controlling around finances, or I'm not controlling around, her emotions. It's about the wife actually expressing to him that she's feels controlled. And yeah, so many of the wives have for various reasons. And I think that's the key part of this as well, is recognizing that just because you don't feel, take finances, that you don't feel like you're controlling her when it comes to finances, like she has a credit card, she can go spend it on what she wants, or but if at some level she feels controlled about it, you have to respect that. You actually have to be curious around where that's coming from, because it's not enough for you to go, well, I'm not controlling her. Because I know what we're talking about. We're talking about her emotions.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because control can be, in an overly masculine way where it's very clear that you're controlling, but it can also be in a pleasing, manipulative way under the radar, right? And, you know, for a lot of men, this is subconscious. As you said, they don't actually realize that they're doing it. Um, I fell into this trap. I'm sure you fell into this trap before. Um, Being subtly controlling, but knowing that there's an outcome that you're looking for, there's a secondary gain that you're looking for by doing that, and not even realizing. I mean, I'd say probably half of the men that we've worked with, they didn't think they were controlling. The other half were very clear. Yeah, I'm controlling here, I'm controlling there. But the other half, they were not at all thinking they were controlling to their wife. So they couldn't understand when the wife was telling them that they feel controlled, where's that coming from? Well, it's that subtle way, that subconscious, manipulative way. And listen, man, there's no blame here. We're not, all done it. It's not something that you need to get hung up on, but you do need to get clear. Okay, ask yourself the question, are there any clear signs that I'm controlling my wife? Okay, if no, then are there any signs from my wife that I'm being controlling, yet I don't understand or I cannot see where and why I'm being controlling? Right? That's a little bit deeper, but you got to look at that and you got to be able to get the help to get to the bottom of that, because control is a huge part of why divorce happens. Some degree of control, right? So you got to be able to accept and understand this, that she's her own human being, okay? The same way that you wouldn't want to be controlled, right? Like, neither does she, right? So look at where you're being controlling outside of your terms. That's one of the gauges that you want to use to be able to determine your terms. And we've talked about this in the past. I'll do a quick review. Terms are the total sum of your masculine identity. Terms are your non-negotiables. Terms come before the relationship, okay? Because if you compromise yourself as a man, then you're pretending to be somebody else, which means that you're lying to your wife, two, you're lying to yourself, and you don't have any compass in your life as to what represents you as a man. And typically, men have 2 to 3 terms that are their guiding principles and allow them to be very grounded in those. And those 2, 3 principles, those 2, 3 terms are not worth compromising the relationship for, because it won't serve you, it won't serve your wife, your kids, nor the relationship, the marriage, won't serve your family. And your wife will have a great deal of respect for you when you do not compromise your terms. So with your terms, you should be super controlling, because that's the only thing you can control. You're in full control of your terms. And anything outside of that is you being controlling unnecessarily, which is where the problem starts. So when we're talking about her feeling controlled, um, typically it starts to fall outside of those term areas.
Yeah, and just to add in relation to the control of your terms, like it's actually more for the man to step up and make sure that he's owning his terms.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a license to go and control somebody else. It's a license for you to step up and go, okay, yes, this is who I am. Like I'm always going to do these actions 100 times out of 100 times, whether that's, checking all the doors at nighttime before you go to bed as a very small example. It doesn't matter how much grief she gives you. She's already gone to bed. You're already in bed. You've just watched a movie. You get back up and you go check all the doors, because that's just, as I said, a small example of you being the man you've always wanted to be. And if she gets annoyed about it, she gets annoyed about it. But it's not worth you not checking the doors, and going to bed and going to sleep and not being the man you've always wanted to be, and not being not that, but not being your terms. right? So the control is actually around you in relation to your terms, not about her in relation to your terms.
Yeah, and we see this so many times, especially when a new member comes into TBH and they start to implement terms. And I'd say probably 2/3 of men do this. They try to make things uh, term related that are
Mm-hmm.
not. And they do that because uh, it's a subconscious mechanism, right? The feelings, their bullets are not pulled yet. They're fairly new. They're getting the grasp of what terms are. They're starting to, dabble in emotional work, but they're, a week or two in, and they start to work on this concept called terms, so that they can get that groundedness. And when the emotions get mixed in, wife is doing X or Y, they'll say, you know, well, I want to go confront my wife because it's a term for me that I'm in a marriage where there's no cheating happening. Well, no, that's not a term because it depends on two people. Terms only depend on you, right? You are a man who's loyal in the marriage. That can be a term because you have full control. But your wife being loyal, you cannot control that. You can influence it, you cannot control it, right? So men start to muddy the water there and try to bring stuff in that they really shouldn't. Um, and so once we put them on the right track, and we go through a couple of these examples, they hear it on our live calls, like right away they get clear. Okay, I see what I'm doing here. I don't need to go there. I don't want to go there. And going through these examples give them really good clarity around, okay, how do terms actually work? And key thing to ask anytime you're not sure if it's term related, who has the control, right? Because if somebody else has the control, or you need somebody else to have your terms met, it's not a term. You have full control of your terms. Okay. So again, terms are critical because if you are controlling outside of your terms, then it becomes a problem in the marriage, because then you're starting to seep that into all areas nice and slowly. But if you're controlling only your terms, you're good. Your wife will not like it sometimes, but it's a very small amount of control within the marriage, and actually gains respect. When you don't compromise who you are as a man, your wife will greatly respect you. And we'll talk about another concept, but it will also allow you to create the space for her to manage the relationship, because she'll know what are the boundaries to do that within. Okay. All right. Up next, she has lost her identity in the marriage as a woman, as a mother, or as a wife, or all of the above. Okay. This is very common. Okay. So let's kind of talk about what do we mean by this, right? So when you get married, you have your identity, you're somewhat clear on who you are. Same with your wife. And as years go by, you get married, you have kids, you get into the routines. Um, Bullets start to show up on both sides, because it's no longer lovey-dovey after 2 years biologically. This heated love goes away and transforms into more of a committed love, right? And within that paradigm, you start to lose your identity. I mean, you as a man also, right? Most men don't know their terms. Most men are not emotionally self-sufficient, right? Most men don't know how to be in marriage. Most men don't know why their marriage is breaking down. So most men start to question, what am I doing? What's wrong with me? Right? Well, same thing goes for her, right? She will lose her identity if she loses her feminine, which is suppressed. If she needs to be in her masculine all the time, she will want to regain her identity back. And the only way she'll think she'll be able to do that is if she exits the marriage. Okay? Because your wife was committed to your family and your family unit, right? Her commitment drove her patience in the marriage, right? And when you are misunderstood for so long, like a long time, you dedicate everything to your family, right? While not having the healthy masculine partner in place, it pushes her to be masculine, right? This has her lose her feminine side. and her identity as well, overall. Now, when this happens, she'll see no other way out because she'll see you as the barrier for losing her identity. She will blame you for losing her identity. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant, right? But you need to be able to acknowledge that that's where she's at. And when she loses her identity and she's in that identity less space for a long time or many years, well, then she'll want to get that back. And I'm sure you've heard, especially if you got the slap or you've spoken to your friends or family going through divorce, wife saying, I want to figure out myself. I want to find myself. I want to be able to figure out what I want in life. All of that talk is around her finding her identity and becoming grounded in that because it's been suppressed for so long, right? Very dangerous place to be.
And even women that become moms, right? There's so much sacrifice on their part, and yes, you can stand back and go, well, she made the choice to become a mom. But so many professional women, like, they end up losing so much for, in a lot of cases, for a period of time, but it's still a huge impact to them, right? Yes, they love being mothers. Yes, they want to have kids. Yes, they want to grow a family, but they end up sacrificing physically. They end up sacrificing an identity in a different arena for a lot of these, career women or women that are even just out there in the world and have their social circle and have their people that they're gonna meet at lunchtime while they're at work. So a lot of women struggle with that adjustment of life also, which feeds into stuff at home. And then if they don't have an avenue for a husband to actually be able to listen to that and relate to it, it can also cause a lot of stress in the relationship.
Huge stress. Yeah. Now, there is something you can do about this, and it's going to sound a little bit counterintuitive. But once you get this concept, it's going to make a lot of sense. What you need to do is you need to give her the level of freedom, just like if you were already divorced, right? Her losing her identity because of the control, because of suppressing her feminine and all those items that we talked about. Well, if the only way she sees possibility of getting that back is by leaving you, then the counter to that, the antidote to that is if you give her the level of freedom now before you're divorced, if you give her the level of freedom just like if you were divorced already, that gives her breathing space. And if that gives her breathing space in which we can move and figure herself out, then she'll be able to potentially get grounded back in her identity, get her feminine back without going, leaving the marriage or going outside of the marriage. Now, obviously, there's a ton of things to be done for you as a husband to create that kind of a context and to be able to hold it. Like, you got to be emotionally self-sufficient, because when you give her the level of freedom, she's going to test the shit out of you. And I mean, she will put you through the ringer because she's searching for that safety and security. She's also searching for evidence as to why she should leave you, right? Why she should go on the other side and see if the grass is really greener on the other side, which, by the way, typically is not. But she'll have multiple tests going at you. And if you're not ready for those, then this giving her the level of freedom, just like if you were already divorced, it's not going to work, because then you're going to start clinging onto her again, right? If you're jealous, if you bullet ridden and you've got all these insecurities you haven't dealt with, you're not emotionally self-sufficient, all of those things are in play, you're going to have a problem, right? So it's not just a context shift, but it's also preparation to be able to hold that context for a long time. But when you do hold it and you give her that freedom, you're taking a lot of the reasons away from her to want to leave the marriage. Okay?
Yeah, it goes back to that topic we've spoken about before, about emotional self-sufficiency, right? Like, there's a deep level of work that a man has to do to be able to provide that freedom for her.
Oh, yeah.
And the reality is, he can either be proactive in creating that environment, or he can be victim to it by her having no other choice but to create it herself by divorcing them. Right? So, and then you still have a choice whether you're going to do the emotional work around it post divorce, or whether you're just going to live in victim and see out your days as a victim of the circumstance, which is a crappy way to live. But there is an avenue to be proactive, do emotional work, actually understand what it is, actually go through it, experience it, and become that solid, consistent, and reliable husband.
Yeah, yeah. When you don't get triggered, and you'll be able to hold that context for a very long time. And it's a freeing context, to be honest. Like once you actually see the fruits of it, and you start to see your wife's feminine emerging, you being more in your masculine domains, like it's really powerful. Okay. Next up, we have she cannot do her role as a wife. Okay. So specifically, I'm alluding to management of the relationship, which is a huge feminine character trait and role for your wife. So husbands and wives have their own distinct roles in marriage. Okay. Yeah, there's an overlap, but there are roles that do not overlap at all. And one of hers is this concept of management of the relationship. And we talked about this regarding previous lives, actually last week's live, where, or the week before, I forget, but it was the concept of the relationship triangle, right? Most men look at their marriage as, the wife and the husband, right? And we've introduced this concept of the relationship triangle: you, the wife, and the relationship up here. Okay. And when you look at this triangle and you separate them as separate entities, then now this concept of management of the relationship starts to make sense. There's you, your wife, and the relationship between the two of you. And your wife manages the relationship between the two of you. You lead the family unit, right? She manages the relationship, but the relationship is specifically between you and her. Okay. And because it's such a strong feminine role and character trait, and it comes very intuitively, to her, not being able to do that, right? Or not being able to be trusted around being able to manage the relationship, causes suffocation and causes her to further lose her identity, further feel controlled. It diminishes her view of herself as a woman. And it'll start to seep over into the kids and how the kids are being dealt with, start to seep over how, you're showing up with friends and family and how the interactions go there. Okay. So it's really critical that you allow her to manage the relationship. The only thing that supersedes her management of the relationship are your terms. So if she's doing something to manage the relationship, let's give an example of what management of a relationship is so actually men get it. Communication falls into management of the relationship. You can lead communication, initiate communication with your wife, but she manages it from there. Okay? Unless terms are compromised, right? If your wife doesn't feel like talking to you, you want to chat with her, you initiate the conversation, but she doesn't want to talk with you. She's managing you to, hey, I don't want to chit chat right now. But if it's something term related, like, hey, one of the kids are hurt, I need to talk to you no matter what, that supersedes that, and then you can push it more. Or intimacy, physical intimacy, that's part of management of the relationship. It's your job as a husband to pursue your wife, but it's her job to manage it from the pursuit, whether she accepts it or not, right? These are components of management of the relationship. What do most men do, right? When their wife don't want to have sex with them, they're not looking at themselves as to how can I be a better pursuer or what can I do differently. They start to blame the wife, right? Because it's expected, it's given. I committed to you for all my life, right? Which has some truth to it. Your wife does have a committed relationship aspect to it, but at the same time, it's her role to manage that, and it's your role to have her accept it based on your pursuing. So those are just two examples: communication and physical intimacy, where management of the relationship are very common. Okay, and that's her role. I'm not going to cut you off.
I'll go for it.
Okay. So, what do you need to do about this? Right? Like, how do you? What needs to be done for you as a man, father, and husband around this? You got to learn your roles as a husband, okay, and focus on that instead of intervening with her roles. You need to become emotionally self-sufficient, because when she manages the relationship, there are things that she's going to do within that will trigger you. Let's go back to the physical intimacy. A lot of men get triggered when they're rejected when it comes to physical intimacy, right? A lot of men will get rejected. And when they get rejected, it hurts them. If you haven't dealt with your bullets, if you don't understand this concept of management of the relationship, it's going to take you down a loophole that you probably don't want to go down on. You'll start to weave stories, and then you'll bring that into the next time you want, physical intimacy with her. And then your game is going to get dry, and you're going to get defeated. You're going to get discouraged. You're already going defeated into that, right? So accepting, understanding your roles as a husband, accepting, understanding her roles as a husband, super critical, okay? And comes with that the confidence, comes with that the emotional self-sufficiency to be able to continue letting her manage. And I guarantee you, if you master this concept of management of the relationship and you start to see your wife flourish in her feminine, it's going to give you such a big fulfillment, such joy. And not only that, you are the one who enabled that. You are the one who was able to create that for her. Like, it's huge. The confidence boost that you get from it, just understanding this concept and the clarity that it brings into your marriage and into you as a husband and how you need to show up and what you need to do, super awesome. Okay?
Yeah, that's, you mentioned the word blame earlier, and we've highlighted it multiple times. So this is not about blame. None of our conversations are blaming her or blaming the husband, but we really do speak about responsibility, which is very different.
Yeah.
And there was so much power and freedom available by actually stepping into and being 100% responsible. It gives you so much control. You're not looking at external influences. You're not giving yourself a way out by saying, hey, she should have 50% of the responsibility and I have 50% of the responsibility, and that makes up the relationship. She has 100% responsibility around being a wife, and you have 100% responsibility around being a husband.
Yep.
And as I said, there's actually so much available when you're willing to take that on and fully own who you are as a husband, independent of who she is as a wife.
Yep. And this leads into the next topic, which you'll see how it connects to this. So she's not exposed to a healthy masculine partner for a long time. This is another reason why women will leave from a marriage, right? Because here's the thing. Polarities start to shift and attraction gets killed. And the reason why that happens is because when men become more feminine, women become more masculine, they're not in their natural state. Now, if your wife, like we went through a bunch of other items, right, as to why your wife leaves. She cannot do her role in the marriage. She lost her identity. She feels controlled. She feels unsafe. She acts on her emotions. Well, guess what? If she's in that space for a long time, and then she's not able to be in her feminine. If she's not able to be in her feminine, she needs to step into her masculine, which is not her natural state. It's not something she's comfortable with. It's not something where she wants to be in. This even goes for women who are working in a masculine environment, because one of the things our members say all the time is, hey, but my wife is in a masculine environment all day. That's why she's so alpha. She's an alpha female. Correct. It's all the more important to allow her to step out of that. Okay? So for alpha females who are in a masculine environment all the time, it's even more important that you are able to create that masculine space so she can step into her feminine. Okay? Otherwise, she has to pretend that she's not who she is, right? By stepping into the masculine and overcompensating for the lack of your masculinity. Arguments increase, she becomes more direct and short with you, more distant, right? It probably sounds familiar. Now, we're not blaming you that you're not being masculine. We're just bringing highlight to it, because when you do step into your masculine, then it creates that space for her to take her masculine off and step into her feminine. Okay? But if you're married 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and consistently year over year, her masculine is being deprived of the nourishments that it needs. One of them is you being a healthy masculine partner. And then she's forced to be in her unnatural state of masculine all the time. That's going to suffocate her, right? And it's suffocating you, because I guarantee you're not happy in you being overly feminine, right? You are not happy in that state. It's not a state that you want to be in. Now, you might have a challenge getting back into your masculine, which is probably one aspect why you're listening. You may not even know that it's your masculine that's the problem, right? We could have made this training called, get back into your masculine. But men are not aware of that fully. They don't care about that. Men at TBH care about being in their masculine because they want to fix their marriage, because they want to keep their family together, because they want to make sure that their child doesn't experience the pain of a broken home. That's why men care about masculine, not just for the sake of being masculine, right? And in the context of marriage, it is critical that you're able to get back into that state.
And despite the catalyst being where the relationship is and the marriage is at, how many men get the benefit of getting clear on what it is to be masculine, actually operating from that place and being out there in the world? Like, how many men have 10x their careers as a result of the work that they've done in TBH, or the contribution to communities, or the sense of identity and purpose work that they do? All because there's so much confidence that you can gain by actually understanding and doing the work to be a masculine man. It's so empowering. It's awesome.
Yeah, let's actually go through what are some healthy masculine traits, right, that help men step into their masculine. Well, one of them is owning your confidence and being able to manufacture confidence at your own will instead of relying on your wife to boost your confidence, right? Knowing your terms, which is your guiding principle in life, right? Not only in your marriage, but in your life. Knowing your terms has you be grounded. You start to know what are the non-negotiables in your life, right? Living a purposeful life. Men need purpose, right? We need purpose in life, something to look forward to, something to work towards, right? So, and being in purpose makes you so masculine that actually it makes you very attractive. For a woman, a man on purpose is super attractive, right? Decision making, being able to decide. Yeah, I know. Your wife asks you which restaurant you should go to. You say one and then she chooses the other one. I know it's frustrating, but the fact that you made the decision on it is what matters. Who cares if she changes the restaurant? It doesn't really matter. But the fact that you took a decision there and you told her that's like quickly, right? Without overthinking it, being decisive like that. And there's just an example, right? But being decisive, very masculine character traits. And the list goes on. I just wanted to give a couple of these, right? So that you're able to get a grasp of what does that actually mean. And of course, by far the biggest one is the emotional self-sufficiency. A man who's taking guidance from his emotions is in his feminine. He is not being a masculine man, right? So that's foundational to all of that. There's 4 or 5. I mean, listen back into the recording, but there's just 4 or 5 big ones that I've mentioned there. You start to implement those, you start to correct those, and not only you're going to feel masculine, but you're going to see how your wife starts to respond to that, how her feminine starts to come out because you're creating that space. Very, very cool, very powerful.
And that restaurant one is such a great example because men that are listening to this have experienced that. I've no doubt men have experienced that. And I invite you, men, to stop paying attention to what your reaction is, right? What your reaction is, whether you're at the point now where it's like, oh, I've suggested going to, I don't know, a state in Maine so many times, and she always like, oh no, I don't want to go there. And she blows off the decision. So now you're like, oh, I'm not even going to make a decision. I'm not going to put anything forward because she's just going to change her mind anyway, or we're not going to end up going there. So what's the point?
Yeah.
And they're the small examples of what we're relating to, saying, hey, this is you stepping away from being masculine because of getting hurt, right?
And
getting
not dealing
frustrated.
with it. And not
Right.
dealing with it, right?
Yeah. And it's compounding moment after moment, day after day, year after year. And yeah, you just stop being masculine in your life because, as we're saying, like unresolved hurt, frustration, anger about stuff. It's like, oh, what's the point? You end up giving up. And that's what you're bringing to your marriage. That's where the responsibility of, hey, that's who you're being in your marriage. And you got to be 100% responsible for that and recognize it, but also know, hey, I can be 100% responsible for where I go from here and changing the direction of who I am as a husband and altering and actually dealing with some of these emotions that come up. So I have confidence to make a decision with 100% zero expectations that she's going to align with it or not align with it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And if you don't do those things, then what's going to happen is our next point here as to why women leave, right? She cannot get through to you. Like, you fail at reading her feminine signs. And there are many reasons for why a man is unable to read the feminine signs, right? One is the man is in his feminine. Okay? The wife is in her masculine and it hurts the man is another one, right? Also, expecting your wife to communicate with you like a man. Because probably one of the most common complaints around when it comes to communication, and this is mainly from new members who don't understand this yet, and they start to, they're in the beginning of the process, a couple of weeks in. Well, why can my wife just tell me directly what she wants? Why do we have to play this game of figuring all this shit out? Well, it's just not how it works, right? If John has a problem, I expect him to come to me and tell me directly, because John and I have a masculine relationship, right? It's not the same masculine, feminine. You cannot treat your wife like a man, expecting her to directly tell you. And we talked about that your wife needs to figure out her feelings. If half of the time she doesn't even know what her feelings are or what they mean because she's unable to express it, how the hell can she come to you and directly tell you what the problem is if she doesn't know what the problem is truly yet? You're starting to see how these are connecting, and this is so critical because your wife, if you've gotten the slap and you've been married for a while, your wife has been giving you signals, giving you these signs for 2+ years. And all of that time, she's been trying to get through to you. All of that time, she believes, she feels that she's been working on the marriage, but she couldn't get through to you. Like, let that sink in for a second. It's huge. Being able to receive and accept and understand how the feminine communicates. Very important in order for her to be able to get through to you. Now, does it annoy you sometimes? Do you not have the patience for it sometimes? Yeah. I mean, heck, 25, I'm making this number up, okay? But 25% of the time, when my wife is telling me something, I know in 10 seconds what she wants to tell me. But I don't cut her off because I know she needs to express it in her own way. Okay, the only time I would cut her off if it's term related. If one of my terms are compromised, if I don't cut her off. For example, I have a call with one of the men scheduled. Or this is great. I have this live. Let's say my wife is at the office sharing something to me, but I got to get on this live at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I got 2 minutes to get on. And my wife starts to talk about something that I know is going to take a long time. I need to create space for her to express herself. Well, in that case, I would cut her off because one of my terms is that I'm a man that makes a difference in other men's lives. That's one of my terms. So now I will cut her off because the term is higher priority than the relationship stuff. And then I'll come back to her and let her know that I'm creating that safe space and re-engage with her to have her express all of that, right? So dynamics like this, super critical in her understanding you and being able to get through to you. And I guarantee that if your wife gets that she can get through to you, then you will get that you can get through to her because she will reciprocate it, right? So getting familiar and starting to learn how to read the signs of the feminine so that you can actually handle it in a healthy masculine way, very important.
Yeah, and the ignorance associated with not creating that space is a sense of control, right? There is no doubt that she will feel controlled as a result of not having that safe space with you. And then going back to Andre's example, like that's another level of leadership where you can still cause A and B to happen. A is his terms, and he's got to be on this live, and B is, okay, I'm going to create the safe space later. I'm not just going to go, hey, I'm leaving by my terms, and whatever she was going to share is not important. Still is important. It just can't outrank one of his terms. But as a man living by his terms, he also goes back and creates that safe space for her later to share whatever she wanted to share, if she chooses to share it at that time. But he is at least following up and creating that safe space for it to happen.
Yeah. And all of this, everything we talked about, culminates into this one last reason. She is checked out. Okay? When she wants out, she's already checked out. And you need to understand how the psychology of marriage breaks down, right? Like it's so important, right? Your wife has been giving you signals for 2+ years. You didn't see them, you didn't care about them, you ignored them, you avoided them, you went into your insecurities, whatever the reason is. But she's been giving you signals. Okay? It goes on and on and on. And things get worse, more arguments. She's becoming more apathetic. She's more short with you, more in her masculine. You can see that she's not herself, losing her identity, right? She's not in her feminine at all. And it goes on. And she's giving you harsher and harsher signs until one day you get the slap. I cheated on you. I love you. I'm not in love with you. I want a divorce. I want to separate. I'm not happy anymore. And it hits you like a brick. Most of the time, like most men, don't even see it coming, right? By that time, she's checked out, right? It doesn't happen from Monday to Tuesday. It's a culmination of years and all of these aspects that we went through, okay, that starts to get her into that space of, I'm suffocated, I've lost my identity, I don't know what else to do. I feel like I've been working on the marriage. I feel like I've been trying to communicate to him. I don't know what else to do. I'm done. That's it. I got to figure something else out. This is just not working. And so you need to be able to accept where she's at with that and take ownership and responsibility for your part in why the marriage is not working. Okay? We are not saying that your wife is not responsible. We are not saying that your wife has nothing to do with why the marriage is failing. We're not saying that. But we work with men, which means that everything and anything we're going to give you are things that you need to do to move the needle in the right direction. Okay? And so start here, right? Fill your toolkit with tools that are proven to help husbands, that are proven to work. And actually start accepting the reality, accepting the fact that there are gaps you have where you may not be understanding certain dynamics that you need to understand in order to fill your toolkit, in order to communicate better, in order to see and understand where she's coming from. Really important. Okay?
Yeah, and the greatest avenue or the greatest leadership that you can bring to try and alter somebody is not actually by forcing them to alter. It's by leading them to a place where they want to alter.
Yep.
Like you paint a picture of the future and you're putting them in that picture and they can see themselves in that picture. But yeah, how many times have you experienced it for yourself where somebody's forcing you to change? You resisted. You made change in the short term, but it's not going to become who you are if it's forced upon you. But through your leadership as a husband,
Yeah.
so many wives go, "Oh, I wonder what stuff I should work on." Or I see all this work that Joe is doing, or Pat's doing, or whoever. Wow, I can see him operating different in life. I can see him having a better relationship with the kids. It causes her to start looking at herself. But if you go there with a list of, "Hey, honey, these are the 20 things that you should be working on,"
Not going to go well.
no.
Yeah. Before I go into the next topic, which is how long does it really take to win your wife back? Based on what we've said a lot in this live, okay, and we have the Bulletproof Husband book, which is free book. You can get it. Just pay for shipping. It's a hard copy book, 330 pages. Distills a lot of the tools and gives you these tools in your toolkit. If you want to grab it, put book in the comments. We'll send you a link, and just pay for shipping, and you got this free book. This book that really distills our membership program, right? It gives you the ability to go deeper and actually see how men have rebuilt their marriage because of the tools that they've used that are laid out in the book. Okay, so put book in the comments, and we'll shoot you a link, and then you can go and grab that. All right. How long does it really take to win your wife back? Well, how long did it take you to get to where you are in your marriage? I mean, seriously, right? And how can you even tell when you have won your wife back? Sometimes as men, we have these desires, these wants. I want to win my wife back, but I don't even know what that looks like. How long does it take? I don't even know what that looks like or what it takes. I'm just focused on the end point, right? So ask yourself, how long did it take to get you there? If your wife, which is scientifically proven, has been giving you signs and signals for 2+ years before giving you the slap, right? How long does it take? Now, we're not saying it's going to take you 2 years. It may even take you longer, right? We're not saying how long it will take you because there's so many variables that it depends on. Are you able to get your wife to see the changes immediately when you start working on the right things, right? Yeah, you can. In a matter of days or weeks. Now, your wife will not tell you that she's seen the changes. Why? Well, because she's hurt. she's checked out, she doesn't want to boost your ego, she blames you, whether it's right or wrong doesn't matter, but in her reality she blames you, right? So she's not going to give you that satisfaction that she's seeing the changes and she's liking them. But if you're depending on her reaction to determine whether you're on the right path or not, you are doomed. Okay? Anytime you're rebuilding your marriage and you're waiting for your wife, especially in the beginning, to tell you that you're on the right path, you're doomed. Because she's not going to give you that satisfaction. Things will actually get worse before they get better, because your wife will test you and it will look like to you that it's worse, when in reality your wife would only test you seriously if she cared. If your wife didn't care, she's not going to waste time to test you, right? But does your wife notice the changes immediately? Yeah. If you implement the changes that we teach husbands, she will notice within a matter of days, within a matter of week or two, right? And her signs that she's noticing it will be her tests. Are there situations where the wife says that I'm seeing something different than you? Yes, the odd one. But we're talking 99% compared to 1%, okay? 99% of the cases, all the hurt she's holding on to, no, she's not going to be able to tell you that. Whereas that's what you're waiting for. And I'm telling you, you have to stop waiting for that. Now, long-term stability in a marriage requires consistency. Your wife seeing your changes will not save your marriage. It will feel good, especially if you start to understand her signs and signals of her noticing the changes, right? Increased communication, being more in her feminine, wanting to talk more, longer, more deeper, intimate conversations, maybe even physical intimacy, a lot of stuff that can happen that are telling you you're on the right path. But the only thing that will rebuild your marriage is long-term, stable, consistent actions that are proven to work, which had you start to get those first signs that you're on the right path in the first place. And you're looking for...
Yeah, sorry, just to tie back to do not underestimate the courage for a woman to get to the point of giving you the slap.
Yeah.
It is a life-altering decision on her part and your family unit's part for her to give you that slap. And it is only natural that she is going to test it. Because we've said many times, she's experienced you changing before. She's experienced you, she's complaining about, hey, we don't do date night anymore. And then you go on date night for two weeks in a row. And then after that, she's not complaining about it anymore. So the next 2 weeks, you don't bother going. Or it's once every 2 weeks, and then it's once a month, and then it's once every 6 months. And then maybe she'll complain about it again. And then you go back and you do it again for another couple of weeks. Yeah. So she's already lived through all of that. And now she's made one of the biggest decisions of her life. And yeah, she's going to test it. Because of previous disappointments, she's going to test it to even contemplate whether you can be different going forward.
Yeah. And I cannot emphasize this long-term stability, this long-term consistency. Yeah, it's so important to rebuild trust. You cannot rebuild trust with her if you're not consistently demonstrating those new behaviors, those changes, right? If it's just spur of a moment, like John said, okay, no date nights, okay, I'll throw on 2 awesome date nights and then F this, we're done. And then another 3 months goes by and it starts again, right? The cycle repeats. She can't rely on that. She can't trust that. And you can't trust it either, right? You're not demonstrating the type of man that's capable of being in that way of being, right? So you have to stay consistent in doing what works. Some of these aspects are in our training. There's free training that we can give you. It's 5 shifts. So 5 things that we go through that will give you the biggest bang for your buck. And what I mean by that is when you do those 5 things, your wife will start to see your changes within a matter of days, if not a week or two, but definitely within a week or two. Okay. Depending on how often you communicate, right? Sometimes there's less communication. If you're living together, very different. If you want that training, put training in the chat or in the comments, and we'll send the link over to you. Okay, John, there's a number of. Oh, you put it already. Okay, cool, awesome. Okay, so John will put that in for you at the bottom. Okay. Management of the relationship, which we touched on. The management of the relationship is a concept that, again, most men don't know, most men never heard of, most men have a hard time fathoming and understanding and even accepting. Okay? There are 3 entities in the marriage, not 2. You, her, and the relationship. Okay? And you have to be able to understand this dynamic, because then the roles of the husband and the wife starts to make sense. There are things that overlap in what a wife does, what a husband does. But what's being done for the relationship, this third entity, that doesn't overlap. That's very, very distinct. Okay? What your wife does for the relationship is very distinct compared to what you do. And one of the things that she does in this triad, if you will, is the management of that relationship between you and her. It's a very feminine character trait. Okay? And there is only one scenario, and I'm emphasizing this because it's so important that you get this. For a man to be able to know how to take actions, he needs to prioritize his actions. He needs to be able to say, okay, if it falls into this category, I do this. If it falls into this category, I do that, but not if this hasn't been done, right? So there's 4 priorities that men have, that we teach men. First 3 of them are based on commitment, terms, cooperation with her efforts to manage the relationship, and purpose. The last one is wants and desires. That's purely based on your feelings. The management of the relationship is the second. This is what your wife does. And your ability to cooperate with the management of the relationship is critical. Because if you fail to do so, then you're suppressing her feminine, you're taking away to her role, and you're forcing her to step into her masculine more and more. The only one time that you would not cooperate is when your terms are compromised. Okay? Really, really critical you understand this concept. I know we went through this in the live a little bit, but I want to deepen it. I want to talk more about it because of its importance in having marriages succeed and in having you as a husband do what's necessary to rebuild your marriage. And without this concept, it's not possible. Okay. Now, let's get into our next topic, okay, which is unspoken promises. Unspoken promises in your marriage. These are promises that you have made through your action, okay? They're just as strong as promises made through your words, okay? Breaking them has just as much the same consequence as promises made through your words. So let's do an example. John, you're good with examples. Do you have one?
Promises through action. Yeah, taking out the garbage.
Okay. Walk us through that.
Go run with it. Yeah. So let's say every Friday morning is garbage day. You check your calendar. That's stuck on the side of the fridge, which is where ours is. It's recycling day or it's black bin day. Take out the garbage, and you've been consistent around it, right? You've been consistent around it for the past 6 months, the past year. And then for some reason, you just wake up on a Friday and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do it today. Like, you just don't feel like doing it.
Or you forget.
Right. Um, she'll notice that. And she may just write it off as, oh, that's unusual. Or if the recycling bill's full, she'll definitely comment on it because now she doesn't have somewhere to put the recycling for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But basically, you've never spoken about, hey, honey, just so you know, I'm always going to take out the garbage bin. But your actions have communicated that. Your actions have communicated, hey, I'm reliable around this. History has shown up until that point that you've been reliable around it. So she trusts you in that arena. Right? So yeah, maybe there's a one-off that depending on the impact to her, she'll comment on it. But say it was to happen again the following Friday, then she'll definitely recognize, hey, something's off.
Yeah.
John used to be very reliable around this. Now I have to start thinking about it. Now do I need to step in? Am I now the one that's going to be responsible for it? Because our garbage is piling up. Right? So that's just again, a small example, but a very illustrative example of promises that are not necessarily communicated verbally, but are definitely communicated through your actions and can also be broken by your actions or lack of action.
And your wife puts more value on your actions than on your words. Now, your words can have huge value if it's consistently backed up by actions. But if your words are consistently not backed up by actions, then the value of your word diminishes, and all the more she'll be looking at you and scoping, okay, what's happening here? Why is he not being consistent with what he's saying? What's the gap here? And then she'll start testing you. She'll start pushing your buttons, right? So unspoken promises are promises made through your actions, and they are just as strong promises as actions made through your words, including the consequences of breaking them. So look at your life. Where are you consistently doing things through your actions for your family, for your wife? And where are you actually breaking them? Where are you breaking the consistency? Like the garbage example. In fact, pull a column and do both. Where am I doing things that I've never promised to do, but I'm promised through my actions, not through my words, and I'm doing them always. I'm sticking to them, and I have. And where are the other column is, what are the things I promised through my actions that I'm not doing that consistently? And it's being noticed, and it's being called out. Okay? All right. One last time, I want to put out the free book, right? If you want to grab the book, get all these tools, 330 pages, make sure you put book in the comments. It is a very valuable book. It's going to give you huge insight. And it's changing marriages, okay? It is available on Amazon, so it's a $30 book. You can get it, just pay for shipping, put book in the comments. All right. Now, before we wrap up, I want to give you a training that has been very valuable for a lot of the men. It was last week's live, okay? Why your wife should not be your best friend. And we talk about the different reasons why relying on your wife or having her as the sole source of your confidence, of your emotional stability, of your sounding board is very, very dangerous. It suffocates her long term. It kills attraction. It makes her more masculine. And it has you have a single point of failure, okay? You don't want to have that. You need healthy masculine relationships in your life to substitute for that. We dive deep in that training, okay? So go to our YouTube channel and search the title, Why Your Wife Should Not Be Your Best Friend in Marriage, and you'll get right to that training. All right, man, that's it for this week. See you next week.
Over and out.
Over and out.